Let's get started with installation. These instructions will work the same if you're on a Windows or Mac computer, and the only assumptions are that you have set up your account and have your client ID and client secret, and that you have node version at least 14 or greater. So you'll go to GitHub, to the Beefree SDK account, and find the Beefree React demo repo. We'll include a link for that down for you below as well. Let's go ahead and clone that. That didn't take long at all. By the way, if you get lost during any of these steps or need a little more detail, the README for this repo contains the complete step-by-step instructions. From here, let's cd into our project, and we'll run npm install to update our dependencies. Once that's complete, we'll run npm install beefree.io SDK to install the official npm package. Again, that didn't take long at all. Now, from either your terminal or from your editor, let's go ahead and list the files out, and we'll see a .env.example file we provided for you. Let's change the name of that to simply .env for proper configuration. When you go into it, you'll notice that we have your client ID and your client secret typed out as text. You'll simply want to go to your developer console and copy your client ID and secret and replace that text right here. Definitely leave the single quotes on there so it's captured properly. Next, let's look at some of the files we have available for you in the sample React app. When you navigate to the source directory and go to app.tsx, you'll find a React function that is describing a button, and that button is linking to this very convenient URL, our documentation. Feel free to replace the URL with one of your choice, or feel free to replace this entire function and component with one that may closer simulate what you have in a production environment. All right, so that last button represented a component, which is a sample component that you might have in your app. Now let's look at the component for the Beefree SDK itself. If you go to Beefree Editor, which is a TypeScript file also in the source directory, you'll see an example we have for you. So we're going to take advantage of the useEffect hook as well as useRef. The useEffect hook will actually manage the lifecycle of our SDK component, and the useRef is going to get that HTML element where the editor will live. And you'll see that right here, HTML div element using that useRef. Next is our useEffect hook, which is really important. We're going to pass that empty array, and then as a second argument, we're telling React, hey, run this code inside here just once, right after the component first mounts, and that'll prevent the editor from trying to reinitialize it every time the component re-renders, which is exactly what we want. Now, inside there, we have this async function, okay? Initialize editor. Let's step through its parts. The first part is the bconfig object itself. This is where we'll configure the SDK's behavior. The most critical part here is the container property. You can see we're setting its value to Beefree React demo, which matches the ID of the div we'll render later. We also have callbacks like onSave and onError, okay? And that lets us react to the events from the editor, like when a user hits save. Now look at this fetch call down here. Remember our discussion on security? Well, this is it in action. You can see we're making a fetch call to localhost 3001. This isn't a direct call to the Beefree API. It's a call to our own local proxy server, which we'll set up in a separate file. The proxy server is where the secure authentication happens, and it sends back a temporary access token that the client can safely use. Finally, with that token in hand, we can create a new instance of the Beefree SDK and call it start method. Okay, you'll see that down here. The start method on the Beefree SDK. This is the moment where the Beefree editor is actually initialized and rendered inside our div container. And that brings us to the end of our component, the return statement. This is simply returning an HTML structure. You see the div has the matching ID, Beefree React demo, and the ref attribute is set to our container ref, okay, which completes the circle and tells the SDK exactly where to render. That brings us to the end of our component. We have a return statement that simply returns the HTML structure itself. You see the div has the matching ID, Beefree React demo, and the ref attribute is set to container ref, which completes the circle and tells the SDK exactly where to render. So in summary, this file gives a ref to get a DOM element, a useEffect hook to safely run the code once, a secure fetch to get an authorization token, and then uses that token to initialize the Beefree SDK. This is the perfect production-ready pattern for embedding the editor in your React application. Earlier, you'll remember taking your client ID and client secret and pasting those into the .env environment variable file. To complete your authorization and authentication, we're going to use the login v2 method. And so we show an example of how to do that with the proxy server JS file. this in the root directory, and you want to do something like this with your production application as well. This is responsible for a very important part of running Beefree SDK within your React app, the authentication and successfully completing the authorization process. Now, the Beefree SDK requires you pass that client ID and client secret on the server side, and you'll see here on lines 14 and 15, we define B client ID and B client secret to reference the ID and secret that you pasted earlier, and then we reference those again here, server side, in this Axios post method. Now we come to what might be the most fun part of the process, running your Beefree SDK instance on your local machine. To do that, I'm going to start with 2 terminal windows. In the first, I'll run node proxy server.js to handle that backend authorization we looked at earlier. In the other, I'll run npm run dev to run our React application. I see it's being served to localhost 5173, so I'll open my browser and go there. And we see the portion of the React application that we built here. Welcome to Beefree Demo, read the docs, remember that button from earlier. And here you see the actual content of the Beefree editor. This editor is currently living within our React application. If you've made it here, I would encourage you to go ahead and start clicking on different content blocks and using what you can from the functionality to find out just how powerful this editor is.